New edition of Ski or Die Truck Talks.
Truck Talks.
I can imagine the beep now.
I know, right? It's so good. Welcome back, guys. As promised, we are in the truck and we're going to have a talk. So, I'm running this episode because I said so.
Oh, snap.
Because I actually had some questions for you. I want your perspective on some things. So, but first, let me get this whole thing teed up. So, there was some conversation that I saw online the other day around what makes an elite skier. Like, what classifies as elite skiing if you aren't basing things on score. And there was some dialogue around where does free skiing fall into that equation, right? And then, of course, how to use scores to determine elite skiing, which feels pretty straightforward. But I guess you could say maybe there is some kind of threshold within that, you know, top 30 in the world. Well, out of those top 30, what do you consider the elite of the elite, right? There's so many ways you can slice and dice this. And one of the commentaries I found the most interesting was somebody said that they believe that all elite free skiers are elite water skiers, course skiers, but they don't believe that all elite course skiers could be elite free skiers. And I thought that was a really interesting conversation because, as we all know, slalom skiing in a course is just taking free skiing and timing it around buoys. So I don't necessarily agree with that conversation. I would actually say the inverse. All elite course skiers can be elite free skiers, but not the opposite. But that's just my take on that very specific part of the narrative.
Yeah, well, free skier or a free skiing like session is kind of subjective, right? It's not measurable like course skiing is. Course skiing is cool in the fact that it's very measurable, and especially with SurePath now and all these things to make sure there's no cheating going on, like it's extremely measurable, and the judgment in whether there's a quarter buoy or a half buoy is far less subjective than most sports. And free skiing is like ultimately subjective, so.
Right, and that's where my wheels got turning, and I thought,
what is an
okay.
elite free skier?
Right, and I said, okay, well, I can't answer that question, but I wanted to talk about what qualifies as elite skiing if we were to take scores away and just look at the best of the best to course ski in tournaments, right? And considering how competitive open men's slalom is right now, I wanted to get your perspective on it and ask you, what do you think, what qualities do you think make an elite slalom skier?
Yeah, super interesting topic. I think most people would probably say like elite skier in the pro realm is, someone who can touch mid 41, runs 39 pretty consistently or semi-consistently, right? Or I guess there's some people who would say, oh no, the elite pros are the only ones who run 39 every time and they're running deep 41 consistently and things like that. So I guess there's some subjectivity a little bit there.
But not based on score. I'm talking about qualities of skiing.
Okay. So just quality of skiing, not about score.
Well, because if you look at open men's, while there's a whole slew of you that can run 3 at 41, and you could say, well, that just is it. 3 at 41, because so many of you can run 3 at 41 and have an average of 3 at 41, that's elite skiing, right? But that doesn't really paint an accurate picture. 3 or more. That doesn't really paint an accurate picture, right? Because within all of those 3s at 41, there's so many different styles of skiing. There's so many body types.
Right.
There's so many different skis that these skiers ski on.
Right.
There's different levels of experience. You have like a Corey Vaughn, who's one of the most seasoned pros on the tour. And then you have kind of like the newer young guns. So, okay, if we can't base it just off of score, then we get to talk about all the other kind of color commentary things. And so I'd love to know, like, when you watch elite skiing and when you ski, what technical things do you think qualify somebody as an elite skier?
Yeah, so instead of me just like jamming on, slalom technique real quick, I have a unique perspective because I did get to ski with some really elite guys. Obviously on tour we were skiing against each other all the time, but I got to ski with some really elite guys last spring when they came down, or in Brando's case, up from Miami.
Yeah.
So I skied with Brando and Cole and Corey Vaughn. So Cole being Cole McCormick, Brando being Brando Caruso, and Corey Vaughn. So I got to see them all ski from the boat, and I also got to pull Cole, and I got to pull Brando. And it was a really eye-opening and amazing experience because I live in South Florida, not as many pro water skiers, and so it was just really, really cool getting to ski with guys of that caliber, that insane top tier level of slalom skiing. And it was really interesting because all three of those guys are such different skiers. Like, if you
Right,
think
and
about it.
that's my point, right? They all won their first pro event last season, which very weird coincidence that we just happened to ski with them.
Yeah.
Last year.
3 out of like the 5 newbies
Yeah,
who won.
yeah. Which we're not taking any credit for their wins. Like, it's pure coincidence. But they all had their first pro win, and so obviously they're all doing something right. But if you watch the three of them ski, it's 3 completely different sports in a good way.
Yeah. It was incredible. So there was a thing I noticed when I was pulling them, specifically when I was pulling Brando and Cole, that they both did better than me. Because of course I'm like thinking about my skiing too. You can't help it but compare.
Yeah.
And this is before I had my season last year. So last year I had my best season ever. And so I was really like, and the year before that I kind of had not the best year. So I was really trying to focus on like, what can I do to get better? Because I was really frustrated. And I was pulling these great guys. So I was really focused on like what they were doing different from me. And what I noticed was they had more consistent gaits than me. All 3 of them. Brando and Cole, I got to pull, so I got to really feel it. When you're driving the pro man, you feel a lot, and you feel the consistency. They had a more consistent gait. They were coming out of their onside way earlier and with way more angle than me. And they were swinging into their offside higher up on the boat than me and with more confidence. Like, I could just tell on the wheel, like they had just such a confident swing into their offside because they just had way more solid reps under their belt than me.
Yeah.
I could just feel that. I could just tell that was what was occurring. And that was really interesting. And like, I feel like those 3 things, it makes sense that they would have higher scores and be more consistent on the water.
Yeah, yeah. So I would love to like break down a little bit because, let's see, 2 out of the 3 you're talking about there are lefties, right? Cole and Brando are lefties. And so them having better gaits than you is a really interesting conversation because you're a righty. And so by default, you would assume that you have a better gait or have like the opportunity to have a better gait. But what you're saying is 2 lefties have really dialed in their gait.
Yeah, I mean, Brando rode for me a lot, and he was really helpful in coaching me and kind of helping me last spring too while he was skiing at Okehili. And all he talked about was the gate. Like, he literally didn't talk about anything else. He just talked about the gate, and I found that really interesting. So like, clearly he held the gate at a high standard. He knew that was a really important part of the pass that's often overlooked.
Yeah.
And so I really focused on my gait, and I listened to what they had to say, even though they're lefties and they have by nature a different style of gait, because it is an offside situation for them. I still listened to what they had to say, specifically Brando, because he was the one who, rode for me the most. And they really craved progression in their gait more than I was used to hearing about, especially at the short lines. So we were working a lot at 39 and 41, and they really wanted, like Cole and Brando, I kept hearing them say, you really want to just be progressive with it. You really want to, like, you can get the ski wet, you can do whatever you want, but like, what you don't want to do is spike the boat too early, because then that's going to swing you narrow and fast. And I found that really interesting and really worked on that a lot.
Which I think the word progressive or progression, like that can lead to a little bit of can of worms in skiing, right? Because there are some people who are too progressive in their skiing. And so for somebody to say to you, you actually need to be more progressive, I just find very interesting. And maybe kind of what separates that conversation is the fact that you're talking about 39s and 41 where you're really starting your swing from next to the boat, whereas 15 off, 22 off, 28 off, you're almost always behind the boat. Even when you're out at the buoy, the boat is still very far down the lake from you. And so when the boat's already away from you, being progressive really can just engage the ZO in a different way. That's kind of like the way I'm imagining progressive being not as productive. But in your case, when you're talking about short line skiing, there is value in progression.
Well, yeah, just because the zero off is a machine and it's just going to respond like just in what the input is given. And if you give it a high spike input too early, it's going to just kind of screw the whole algorithm up. The whole what it really wants on a gate is, I mean, I say what it really wants as if it's not a machine, but it makes sense contextually.
Yeah.
If you say what it really wants is it wants you to have the highest load when it's engaging the engine.
Mm-hmm.
If you're giving it load too early and it's not engaging the engine timing wise, then you're either going to be swung narrow or swung fast, and usually you're going to hit an inside edge and you're going to have a loose line going into your one ball. And for me as a righty, it's an offside turn to start, so you don't want to be manipulating the ZO in a negative way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I the way I think about it in my head is that ZO wants you to go together,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it wants, when you engage it wants it to be at a time where it is appropriate for also to engage you back so that it can swing you up and out, versus if you engage it too early, now it's going to try to catch up to that and it's going to swing you kind of earlier and therefore like on a narrower path.
Yeah, exactly. Like I see the mistake happen a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you just load, and when I'm driving people,
Yeah.
if you load it so early at the top of the gate, like when you're turning in, you drop your butt, or for some reason there's a load on the line like early,
Yeah.
before center line, it's just a bad situation for the driver, I think, for the ZO, and just like where you want to end up, because like you also have to ask yourself, like, where do I want to end my swing? Where do I want to actually be? At the top, at apex.
Yeah.
The answer is, wide and preferably not flying like down the lake, like super narrow and fast, right?
Yeah.
You want to be wide and you want to be almost slowing down with the boat,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. And so if you can have a more progressive gait and kind of try not to have direction, you need to have the ski on angle.
Yeah.
And you need to have direction cross course. But if you could just not load it too early, then you get that nice swing up, and as the ZO stops, hitting the engine and the RPMs come down, you're also up next to the boat, and the ski is on edge and you're slowing down as well. Versus you hit it really hard at the top of the gate, and then it hits you again with the RPMs because it's ZO, it's just a machine. So you've kind of double hit the engine. Now you don't get that swing up wide. You're kind of swung narrow on an edge too early, and you're flying down the lake super fast, and the boat's getting away from you. Like that's like not really the preference, right?
Well, and I don't want this to become a whole episode about gates, but I do have to like add a caveat in there as a lefty, and you're talking about two lefties, that when you say don't load the boat too early at the top of the gate, you don't mean be loose, be out of control, be super free, right? Like I think a really great example of somebody who has really great line control at the top of the gate who's a lefty is like a Dane Meckler. So he's never behind the boat at the top of his gate. He's never like generating a ton of load from that high place. But if you notice, he's really good at managing line tension so that the driver does know he is there. He's not loading the boat yet. And that helps the driver drive better because they can anticipate that once he starts to put a little pressure on that line and he starts building that load, it's not coming as a surprise to the driver.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely, that's another thing that I notice about all these skiers is that they're very well connected to the boat. I mean, it's like there's an iron rod between the handle and their hips at all times. And regardless of what's happening in the course or at the top of the gate, they're connected to that, line through their hips. And so not to take away from that, but in a deeper conversation, when it comes to when the load occurs, I think it's preferred to have a progressive load and have it the max load being at center line. And most of these skiers are skiing, A's and B's. So like that's another thing to take into consideration.
You mean zero off?
Zero off letters.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, no, I mean, of course they're going to be very connected to the boat, and they're going to be taking a lot of angle.
Yeah.
Right. So they're not going to be progressive in the sense that they're just rolling the ski and they're being like super lazy with it, and then they have no angle, and then all of a sudden that center line they're going to have this big moment.
Right.
Like that's not what I'm talking about. Like you still have to take angle at the top of the gate, but they're really smart about where they have load or take load or add load even if they are adding load, because a lot of these guys just don't even add load. They just take whatever the boat gives them.
Yeah, right. And I think like a good way to visualize it can be, okay, if I start my swing, here at a point, we'll just say point A, and I know that it's only going to swing, we'll just say 50 feet for like just a stupid reference point. If I start it here and I know it's going to swing 50 feet, well, does that end point put me up wide outside next to the buoy? So does that mean I need to actually start later so like my ultimate destination is in the right place? And so if you can imagine looking down on the slalom course from a bird's eye view of the ski path, there are times to think about it as like I just want to pick up my path and just adjust it and move it over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can start to kind of fine tune it sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then to go to the next point, past gate, the onside.
Yeah, so
it was incredible.
Tell me how did you describe it? Was a dominant onside?
Super dominant, like super angled and super early.
Well, so tell us a little bit about what that means, because while most people take their onside for granted, there are people who have not so great onside, right? Like they'll say, I'm actually very offside dependent. And while that's wonderful and that's huge bragging rights, because everybody would love to be able to be offside dependent, you're saying that these two elite open men's skiers are very onside dependent.
Well, I mean, I think at 39, 36, and especially 41, of course, like I feel like you have to be dependent on both sides. I think anyone would say that. So anyone who's seen elite level slalom skiing, I think would admit that you have to be dominant on both sides. Like you have to be confident on both sides. So you can't really be like one side dominant and then like the offside you just check all the time. And Brando kind of does that, although he's just like he's kind of an outlier.
Well,
he's
Italian.
conversation.
There's a lot of flair there. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't relate.
But I think when you're going 36 and you're at 39 or shorter, it's just you kind of have to be. You have to have good turns on both sides in order to run it consistently.
Well, what makes a dominant onside in your opinion?
Just driving them, it was very apparent that they were just taking more angle than me and they were earlier than me out of their onside. So it just gave me something to think about, because I always pride myself on having a good onside, but it just made me think like they're just getting further up course than me. Like they're ahead in the pass because they're taking so much angle out of their onside, and they're just so dominant there. Like I had to be ready on the wheel. They're lefties, right? So it'd be their 135. Like
right.
I had to be so ready for them out of 135 because they were just coming at me, and they were using that dominance to get so high and early on the boat into their offside that it made the offside almost trivial. Like I knew they were coming out because they were so wide and early.
Which I think you're kind of bleeding into point 3 about swinging high into their offside, and I think that's something a lot of people back down from because they know they're going into their offside, right? And so they want to have glide, they want to have time to prepare, they want to slow down, they want to feel the line really tight. But what you're saying is these guys, at least visually from observation, they're kind of pursuing the opposite. They're coming out of their 135, which is their onside, into their onside cut, which is really easy for them to be dominant in, and they're capitalizing on that opportunity, and then getting really high into 2-4, which is their offside.
Yes, totally. I think they want to be free because you have to be free at 39 because you have to get ahead of the boat a little bit, just because of the physics of it. So if you have a tight line off a second wake into an offside, it's really bad because that means the boat's ahead of you and you're going to be narrow.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have slack on the back, and you're going to have it's going to be like a kind of heavier hit on the back of the offside if you're tight in, if that makes sense.
You risk having to kind of more so pull to the next buoy versus a swing. If the
Right,
boat's
yeah, it just
already,
messes up the rhythm, right?
yeah, if the boat's already advanced too far down the lake and the line is already too tight, it's really hard to start that swing. And that's kind of circles back to the beginning of this conversation, talking about how to engage the ZO and be more progressive so that your swing starts when you want and ends where you want. So I see the value there.
Yeah, when slalom skiing, you're always thinking about the next thing, right? It's like, why am I taking all this angle on this onside turn? It's because you need to get high and early and wide up into your offside. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be early, but like you want to be in rhythm with the boats. You don't want to be fighting the boat at all. So you're taking all this angle out of your onside so that you have that really organic swing up into your offside to take pressure off of the next buoy. It's always the next
Right.
thing. It's like, why am I coach to this a lot. I think you want to be thinking about why you're doing things. You know what I mean?
Right.
Why am I, doing a progressive gait? Is so I can get to a certain area in my one ball. It's like, why am I taking angle earlier out of your onside? It's so you can get to a specific spot into your offside.
Yeah, a way I like to think about it around the offside is, okay, if I don't swing up super high and wide, now I'm coming into the buoy and the buoy is in front of me versus the buoy being, I'm a lefty, right? So I'm talking about 2-4, the buoy being to the right of me. And if the buoy is in front of me, now I have to get my ski outside it and then basically make a right turn. If I'm high and wide next to the boat and next to the buoy is actually going to be on my right side, and now all I have to do is make a right turn. So it's kind of like making it easier because you have less steps. I don't have to worry about the ski getting outside the buoy.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just a simple right turn.
I love it. Well, I think this was really cool conversation. Thanks for letting me nerd out.
And
Sorry
it was,
to.
so fun to like hang out with Corey and Cole and Brando. Like, they're just super nice guys, and they're really generous with like their knowledge and their willingness to like help and share. So it's kind of fun to talk about, 3 really good dudes who are like good people, but also really good skiers.
Yeah, totally. I kind of feel bad, like speaking for them almost about their technique. It's just what I've observed. So, like,
Yeah.
take it, as you will. But
Of course, huge asterisks on this episode. This is just like our observations, and none of this is necessarily like things they've said to us. I would never want to put words in a skier's mouth or take credit for what they're working on. But it is fun to like watch your friends ski and analyze it.
it's super fun. It was such a cool experience. So thanks to those guys for coming and skiing with us. And
Did you just like parallel park during this episode?
yeah,
Of course you
I'm
did.
kind of on a curve. So sorry to the city of Lake Worth or West Palm, wherever we are.
Cool. Well, thanks for letting me run the show. I think this was a super cool episode.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, take it easy, guys. Truck Talks.
Truck Talks!